Hey, everybody. Welcome to the I303 podcast, where we share ingenious insights and oddball opinions from the perspective of an IO. Today, I have Christine Mikhail with me, and we're going to get into change management. But before we jump into that, Christine, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about yourself and potentially
Sure,
your origin story.
absolutely. So, Christine Mikhail, I have a master's in industrial organizational psychology. I have been practicing for I'm going to say nearly 20 years because I was practicing in IO before I ever knew IO existed, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah.
So, I have been in learning and development for years. I started my career in luxury retail as a trainer, and I built sales teams that started as individual contributors. I grew people into leadership and corporate roles. I opened up stores on the West Coast, coaching all of those staff from San Diego to LA and over to Scottsdale, Arizona. And I started doing a lot of training development and then realized that's just this small piece of this large portion of IO psychology. And believe it or not, a client of my luxury retail store said, you should look into IO, knowing that I had a background in psychology and had spent some time working my own business. And so I was like, okay, eyes were opened and I fell in love, right? It was a perfect blend of what I'd been doing to what my undergrad was. So I got an opportunity to really build upon my undergraduate degree. And then I started working right away in architecture and design, and I jumped right into change management. So at the time, we were doing a lot of changing people out of legacy space from closed offices into big open workplaces. And so it was, how do we understand how people work? What are the tools, technologies, and products they need to be better at their jobs? And as an IO psychologist, my focus was culture, my focus was process, my focus was a collaboration, cross pollination between teams. And then, as luck would have it, I started to get introduced into change management. This firm had a whole change management team, and I started to just kind of jump in head first on how are we going to train people on this new way of working, and how are we going to get them to be comfortable with an open space, and what are the etiquettes and the norms, and how do you function? And so that started my journey on change management. I've since been ProSci certified. I launched my own firm 5 years ago, and though we do everything IO, the crux of our business has been change management. Because 5 years ago, we were in the middle of a pandemic and the world was changing at such a rapid rate. So many firms had no idea how to work remotely. They were just not equipped. And so that's why I was brought into so many organizations. And that's what really catapulted my firm into the firm that it is today. Without the COVID world, nobody would have known change management was so important. So that's where
Gotcha.
we're here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions just to follow up on that. So
Yeah.
IO, although it's kind of a growing and pretty established discipline, a lot of people
Yeah.
still don't know what that is. And so
Yeah.
when you go about, sharing your experience or background, how do you describe IO?
Yeah. I love that question. So the way I honestly try to bring it down to brass
Yeah.
tacks, because, I recently learned people don't know what IO is because you don't think there isn't one thing that we do, right? When you say I'm a physician, people know what that means. When you say I'm a lawyer, people know what that means. But the world of IO psychology is so vast, right? We can do employee engagement, we can do data analysis, we can do culture analysis, leadership alignment. We could do so many different things. So the way I talk about IO psychology, I say it is the science of people in the workplace. That's how I talk about it. How are people working? What are they doing? How do we use the technologies that are coming at us to help our humans function
Mhm.
better? And to me, that's all science.
Yeah, 100%. And I like how also in your origin story you shared the concept of culture. And I think most business owners or most individuals who don't come from an IO background don't fully recognize kind of the power or the impact culture can have.
Agreed.
One of the quotes I really like is Peter Drucker's, where he shares something along the lines of culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah,
And if that's the case, I think we're best positioned to be able to, one, specify what the culture is, and then how
yes,
potentially to modify or change it. Would
exactly.
that be fair to say?
Exactly. In fact,
Okay.
I was just talking to my client this morning
Okay.
about the change that they're going through. They're trying to revamp their sales organization. And they're like, we're just a culture of nice people. And I
Yeah.
said, culture of nice people is great.
Yeah.
You don't have to change your core competency and the who you are to adopt new ways of working. We just need to recognize we're working inside the box of this culture and let's leverage it to our advantage. We don't need to change it.
Yeah, I agree. And so the last thing I want to kind of bring or ask, get your thoughts on is you made the transition from kind of an employee to kind of a
Yes.
business owner, entrepreneur. That
Yes.
doesn't necessarily always come from IOs. So I'm curious if you could share a
No.
little bit more in terms of what guided you, what motivated you,
Yeah.
what inspired you to take that route.
Yeah, love that question. Okay, so my origin story
Yeah.
should have talked about this. I grew up in an entrepreneurial home. My
Okay.
mom owned her own business for 40 years. Um, and that was not an easy feat. She ran a 24-hour daycare. She built it in the 80s in Texas when economy was just horrible, and she was raising three children by herself. So I give a lot of credit to that being a model to look at, and know that it's possible. Also, she was a female immigrant. So she had a lot of things stacked against her, but she did so well. She put all three of her children through college. We were debt free. We graduated debt free. So she showed us what entrepreneurship can be, right? So it starts there. I launched my first business ever right out of college. Like
Yeah.
I worked for about 3 years with autistic children. And I was like, I kind of really love the sales world. So I opened my own business. I had a small retail store in Houston, Texas. And unfortunately, the 2008 crash had me close my doors, which was fine. But the bug for being my own boss was there. That's where I went into luxury retail. That's where the role of leadership, learning and development came in. And then in graduate school, I always knew I wanted my own firm.
Yeah.
But not many people would be grateful to the pandemic, but I was because it
Yeah.
gave me that push to like launch my own firm. So at the time, I was doing internal consulting, and the firm that I was working with, the company that I was working with, was in the travel industry. And during COVID, all planes were grounded and my role was eliminated. And so at the time, I was like, I'm just going to start taking some gig work. And my gig work snowballed into, honestly, I did $1 million in revenue to date. Like,
Okay.
that's a pretty
Congratulations. That's
big,
pretty
thank
good.
you. That's a
Yeah.
pretty big deal. Like, it got me out of graduate school debt. It got me out of, I was able to refinance my home, all of the
Yeah.
things that I know entrepreneurship can do. But I'm going to say it is not
Yeah.
for the faint of heart. Like, you got to be ready for the droughts because they come. Like, droughts are real, and I've experienced several moments of drought in my 5 years of business. I
Yeah.
anticipate future drought. I recognize that that's just part of the business, but I just knew after I was let go in my last role, the words that rung in my ears all the time were, I'm never going to let someone else control my fate. I
Yeah.
just couldn't let that happen. I was going to be the master of my own fate.
Yeah, I agree 10,000%. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on what do you see as the biggest surprise in making that jump, or maybe the something that was unanticipated? What was, okay, this is pretty cool, or this was a lot harder than I thought.
Yeah, okay. So I have two answers.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what was really pretty cool. Within 6 months, I circled my salary twice.
Okay.
That was insane.
Yeah.
That was crazy for me in my first year. To say I had capped my salary within 6 months was just unreal. So that was totally unexpected.
Okay.
I spent 5 years postgraduate school paying my student loan every month
Yeah.
diligently. And I graduated with $48,000 in debt for my graduate school program. Paid diligently for 5 years, David. And
Yeah.
by the time 2020 hit and I had launched my business, I was in $52,000 worth of
Whoa.
debt.
Okay.
So even though I paid,
Yeah.
it was the interest was so high that I was not even getting anywhere near putting a
Yeah.
dent. So my business was able to pay off my student loan in 3 months. That was huge for me. That was a big deal. I took advantage of the fact that all student loans, like interest on student loans, were on
Yeah.
pause during the pandemic, but I wasn't going to be the person kicking down the can. I was like, I want this monkey off my back. So those were two huge surprises for me. The last, what was shocking was going into 2023, I didn't think I would be it would be a drought for 12 months. And I was in
Okay.
a 12-month drought. But I did so well in 21 and 22 that it carried me through 23, which is great, especially since I'd paid off my student loans and I invested in a local business. Like I made my money, try to make money for me, but I didn't expect to go into a 12-month drought. That was probably the most unexpected. And I think the greatest lesson from that is take all of the work you can when you can get it, never turn away business, which I never did, but recognize you might need a nest egg for 12 months.
Perfect. And so consulting, that's essentially in a nutshell the business that you started.
That's right. I started
Okay.
consulting and organizations just hire me on project
Yeah.
basis. And the more messed up they are, the longer term the project is, which is great.
There you go. And the
Yeah.
more in need of change management, it sounds like they're going to
100%.
be
Yeah,
perfect. And
100%.
so that'll transition us right now to the next topic. So I do
Yeah.
want to get your thoughts, not just from a consultant perspective, but from an IO perspective. One, what is change management? And two, do you approach it a little bit differently?
Yes, love that question. Okay, so change management traditionally will tell you we are in a current state. We have a vision to go to a future state. The change, the managing of that change is how do we get the humans from point A to point B, right? The way our firm looks at change management is very different. We like to flip change on its head.
Hmm.
Because here's what's happening. Change is constant now.
Yeah.
Change is evergreen. We aren't just getting from point A to point B anymore. We are in a constant state of change, especially in organizations. Technology has vastly changed the way we work, and it changes every day. So, in order for us to be able and equipped to handle a constant state of change, we talk about change from a psychological, emotional, and behavioral perspective. And the way we talk about it is in 6 different stages. Very much like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about the 6 stages of grief, we talk about change in 6 stages. And so we like to guide people through the emotional responses and the behavioral changes they need to adopt and the emotional responses they need to recognize in order to adopt change successfully, or at least be more resilient to change.
Gotcha. And so would you mind sharing a little bit more in terms of what those steps are? And if you see at any one point, it's kind of a sticking point for most organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. So the first piece is a lot of organizations or people will look at change and say, wait, I don't understand. Don't we have like just trying to get to this particular end state? The answer to that's always yes, but the first stage of change is always doubt, especially in organizations that are in constant stages of change. Employees are like, oh, here we go. Here's just another change. I doubt it's going to happen. The reality is, we talk about change in that first stage as we address the doubt. And with the doubt always comes the inevitability. So we always talk about the inevitability of change. That is our first step. The next step, we talk about releasing the resistance to change. So how do we do that? What are we holding on to? And how do we let that go in order to propel us forward? Because what we talk about in that week is if we're constantly resisting change, what is that keeping us from? What are we hindering ourselves from doing better? What are we hindering ourselves from doing more efficiently? And what am I hindering myself from growing? What am I losing if I don't release this
Okay.
resistance?
Gotcha.
And then in the next stage, we talk about building resilience, right? So we now know we're in a constant state of change. It's evergreen, it's always here. In fact, uh, a leader, I think Alpine Intel, has been quoted to say, change management is no longer a phase to manage, but rather a core competency to adopt and a skill to have. And so we talk about building resilience in that it pertains to that, right? So how do we build a resilience to change? Recognizing it's evergreen, recognizing there are things we can control and then there are things we can't control. So how do we build resilience around that? And then in our next stage, we talk about change fatigue because it's real. People are so tired of constant change. And so what we talk about in that week is we recognize there's always change. We recognize that it's exhausting, but not all change needs to exhaust us. We don't have to constantly think about every component of change that's happening in our lives that makes us exhausted. So we talk about how to handle change fatigue. And in those last two stages, we talk about adaptation and finally the adoption of change. So it's like, how do we put ourselves in a constant state of adaptation? We are an evolutionary group of people, group of humans, a species. How do we evolve into being in a constant state of adaptation? And then how do we adopt?
Gotcha. And so when it comes to change, I've seen it come to be from a couple of different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
One is either top down or
Yeah.
bottom up, or some
Yeah.
combination of the two. From
Sure.
your experience, is one more effective than the other? What are your thoughts there?
I love a grassroots change
Okay.
effort, but it's not always as successful as a
Yeah.
top-down change effort. Like it's not. It takes a lot for a grassroots effort to be adopted by the entire org. But when you have a top-down effort, meaning someone's actually being held accountable, someone actually is sponsoring the change, adoption's much easier. It's easier to get in line when you recognize that this is coming from the leader of your org and they believe in it than it is from saying, Christine and David really think this is a really
Yeah.
much better way to do this job. Let's try to get you and I
Yeah.
can only impact the team that we're around. We don't
Yeah.
have the visibility or the authority, frankly, to
Yeah.
go all the way up. So as much as I love a grassroots
Yeah.
effort, top down is really most successful.
Yeah. And I've experienced that a few times where, I'm trying to change the team, change the department, change the org. And it's like, I've gotten the feedback, well, who are you? Why are you telling me?
Exactly.
And it's like, yeah, you got a point.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except who you are is the person who's in the weeds every day. You actually know how to do the job better. So this for me, and maybe this is the best way to answer that question. You need both for a true successful change
Yeah.
management, right? Leadership needs to be supportive, but they also need to have their ears open to say, hey, David, how do we do this better? You're the one who's in the weeds every day. You know what makes it better. Talk to us about how to make it better. And that relationship is what makes a true success to change.
Gotcha. And I agree to your point that, so circling back a little bit, individuals are reluctant to change, but it's no longer, segmented based on time. It's an evergreen, ever happening thing. To your point,
Yeah.
I also think it's going to be a critical competency or a core competency needed to be successful in the role.
Yeah.
With that said, there are still individuals who are in leadership roles. Maybe they're a little bit older. Maybe they come from a different time period where
Mhm.
change wasn't happening as fast. From your
Yeah.
perspective,
So
what
true.
do you see as kind of what's driving someone to finally say, you know what, I think it's time to change, or I think we need Christine to help us engage in this change?
So I think when we talk about those leaders, we talk about those people that might not have been as exposed to constant change. We know that demographic, right? We know who they are. Um, what appeals to that demographic in my mind is market. At the end of the day, are you making the same money you were
Hmm.
making last year?
Okay.
And if you're not, what has changed in the market that you're not adopting? And if you are you missing out on other opportunities in the market because you're refusing to change? To me, we just need to show them the data of, I've said this phrase several times this week, and I'm going to say it now. You just have to follow the money. Like at the end
Gotcha.
of the day, it's like, am I bringing in the money that I need my firm to grow, or are we stale? Are we staying the same and there's no growth pattern? And why isn't there a growth pattern? Is there a part of the way we work that needs to change in order for us to adopt new things in the market or to capture new segments of the market. And I think what happens, again, I was just talking about this to a client this morning. I was like, so many of the leaders, because of the change, I'm actually in the process of guiding a change an organizational change, and the leaders are so averse to change. It's the biggest hindrance, right? And one of the leaders literally said to me, but we've been doing this long, we're going to continue to be successful. And I said, and Kodak was printing pictures for so long and refused to go digital. And look what happened. You have to change to adopt different segments of the market. And I think that's the way we appeal to that audience.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but there's so many. There's Blockbuster. I'm trying to think. There's Sears. Well, they're probably on the ropes right
Party
now.
City.
Party City. Yeah.
I
And it's
mean,
like,
what Joe Fabrics, like, what are we talking? I mean, yeah, Sears, like Sears is such a big, Sears could have so been Amazon
Yeah. So
had they chosen to pivot.
real quick, technically they were, because they had the catalog. So even think before the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
they had,
so
and
true. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I'm gonna order this, item
Oh my
JXY123, and they'll
Yes.
deliver it to you.
Yes.
That's Amazon today.
It is Amazon today. Thank you for reminding me. I was
Yeah.
literally, my husband and I were watching this show called America, the story of us. It's a docuseries. I forget on which streaming platform, but you're right. They literally said, and Sears would send out catalogs to people, and they would use the railroad system to ship, and people got packages so quickly. And I looked at my husband, I was like, bro, that's Amazon in the 1890s. And he's like, yeah, it's exactly what it is.
That's pretty much what it was.
Yeah.
So we talked about change, mapping your approach to the Kubler-Ross process. We also looked at top down versus bottom up. What are your thoughts on having change be not just an emotional process, but an intellectual process? So I think you touched upon that with individuals hiring the org being more market, what's the word that I'm looking for? Paying closer attention to the market rather than also incorporating or considering the emotional aspect of change. Have you seen employees lower or higher in the org kind of value one over the other? And how should individuals balance, if that's the case, balance the change?
Okay, I want to make sure I understand the question. So when we talk about, are we talking about where people are positioned in the org have more intelligence to change, or sorry, help me understand the question.
So let me try that one more time. So from my experience, change really comes or falls into two bigger buckets. One is kind of the emotional aspect of change, and the other is the cognitive or thought process behind change. So I know logically this is why we should, versus I know emotionally I feel that we should.
Yes.
Do you feel, or what is the right balance to strike when engaging in that change?
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Let's talk about Kubler-Ross's process.
Okay.
Let's just talk about what happens in the loss of a loved one. We'll just break it down in that perspective, right? Because this is what changes. You're losing something. The logic is, well, that person's not here anymore. But the emotional side is, but why not? That's what I used to wake up every morning and have coffee with this person. I used to sit down and have dinner before I went to bed with this person. Why isn't, like, that emotional side is illogical, because emotions are illogical, right? So I actually think the balance is recognize your illogical emotion and why you're having those feelings, because it's okay. Those feelings are okay. Any loss is okay to process, and any new skill is okay to be nervous to adopt. That's okay. It's okay to be like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to function in the computer world. I don't get computers. It's okay to feel those things. But the logic is, but those things are happening. We are not. I remember having a conversation with a client that told me once, I remember when computers came out, people said, oh, it's just a fad. They're not going to last. I mean, now we carry computers in the palm of our hands, right? So obviously that was not true. But that was very emotional response. But the logic is, I still had to learn the machine, fad or not, in order to get my job done. So I think the balance is recognize your fear, recognize your your sadness, recognize the illogical pieces of the emotion that are happening because you are losing something. You're having to learn something. And a lot of people learning something later in life is very um, anxiety ridden. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
so hard to learn something new late in life, and people just don't want to do that. And it's really hard when we're dealing with a certain demographic that, went from typewriters to
Yeah.
computers. Do you know what I'm saying? That's whereas when you're dealing with the other people in your organization, the new employees in the workforce who have literally had a device tethered to their palm since birth,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, they're comfortable with all of this shift. You're not. So we need to talk about why it's okay to have those feelings. But then we also need to be in the logical side of IO psychology. And as change practitioners, we need to recognize that means we need robust training systems, robust workshops, like sandbox play. Come in here, feel out
Yeah.
how you know what I mean? Like we need to have you practice the change before we thrust the change upon you. It's not fair to do that. To me, that's the balance of intelligence or the cognitive piece and the
Yeah.
emotional piece.
Gotcha. And so one of the things when change is happening so rapidly, so constant, and in so many aspects of someone's life, I mean, it's not just the workplace, it's everything. Everything's changing.
Yeah,
Society, you know, social systems, financial systems, everything, it seems to be
everything,
speeding up. Yeah. And
everything.
so
Yeah.
when all of those come together, what what does that do to an individual? How does that impact them? Or what is that even called? Is there a name for that?
Can I be like, what's the word, provocative?
Sure.
I think what happens is there are more violent societies. I mean,
Okay, tell me more.
I really feel like at the end of the day, we are constantly dealing with so many ways, so many things that we can't control. You just described financial change constantly, right? We are in an economic tornado. I'll
Yeah.
call it an economic tornado. Everyone's dealing with paying $10 for eggs. They weren't
Yeah.
doing that before,
Yeah.
right? No one's getting more money, and there's nothing we can do about that. No, no, no,
Yeah.
none of us are going to walk out of our jobs because we need them in order to buy said $10 eggs. We also have our government is also funding wars that we may or may not agree with. I'm not here to talk about all of those things. I'm just saying those are things that we are being impacted by, right? There are political issues in our country itself that we are being impacted by, and that leads to just constant states of anxiety, and I think
Yeah.
that leads to a very violent society. I think that's what happens, and I believe that we don't, which is why I believe so hardly in this course. Building change resilient populations is the way to address those things, because what we're doing is just thrusting people in a constant state of stress, anxiety, and the inability to control. We can't control the economy. We can't
Yeah.
control the political landscape. We can't control wars across the pond. But there is an impact to us just in our nervous system, in our bones, in our muscles, and all of the things. And we can't ignore that. And I think it manifests in more violent, wild societies. Like there are so many times where I look at the news and I think, am I watching a cartoon? I can't believe that's real. Like that can't be real. But it's real. It's
Yeah.
almost like, it's almost like I'm being punked on when I watch the news. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And I think
Yeah.
that's how it manifests.
I think to your point, as you were sharing that, an analogy that popped into my head is imagine, we're a wild animal and we have all these factors that are slowly backing us into this corner. And it's just more and
Exactly.
more. And eventually it's like, okay, my only way out
Exactly.
from a reasonable perspective is to kind of lash
Yes.
out or
Yes.
fight my way out of this.
That's right. That's
And
right.
it, go ahead.
I'm the, what's the word? Are they buffalo? I'm the buffalo at Yellowstone Park who's looking at the human like you're an idiot to come up
Yeah.
against me, but I can only attack because you're infringing upon my territory. And I think that's what's happening in society. We're just attacking each other.
Gotcha. So tell me about compounding change. What is
Yeah.
that?
Compounded change,
Compounded
perfect
change.
segue.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect segue into what we were just talking about. It's everything we were just talking about, right? We're
Okay.
dealing with geopolitical change, we're dealing with economic change, we're dealing with personal change. Right? People are getting married, they're getting divorced, they're having children. We're dealing with ailing parents. These are all personal changes that are happening in our own lives. So the things that we talked about, geopolitical, economic, all of that stuff is the ancillary, right? That's just the additional stress that we're not even,
Yeah.
we don't have control, but we do have the control over the getting married, getting divorced, having children, dealing with ailing parents. Those are the things that we have control over. We can't decide whether or not we want to do them. Sure, you can decide whether or not you want to have children or get married or get divorced, whatever, but you're going to take care of the children you choose to have. You're going to take care of the ailing parents because we are a generation that are dealing with both, right? We're raising children and dealing with ailing parents. So we're what they're calling the burnt out generation. There's just so much change happening that we're exhausted. Add to all of that, David,
Yeah.
the changes constantly happening in our workplace. Organizations are restructuring themselves. Technology is constantly changing. We're asking people to adopt new platforms or
Yeah.
new softwares. So for me, it's like that's compounded change. In our workplace alone, we're dealing with like 5 different components of change, let alone what's happening in our personal life, and then all of the geopolitical, economic, all of the all of the
Yeah.
things that are just surrounding us. That to me is compounded change, and that's why I coined the term 3 years ago. I was like, we're just in a place where change is inevitable, and we're not just dealing with one facet of that anymore. We are dealing with so many components of change that it is compounding and it's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 10,000%. And it's almost, we try to, what's the word that I'm looking for? Isolate different aspects of our lives to not
Yes,
have them influence one another. But it gets to a point where it's inevitable that work life,
100%.
personal life, parents, kids, married, not married, where I'm
Yeah.
going to live,
Yeah.
finances, all of that.
All
It's
of it.
almost, yeah, it would be impossible for somebody not to have those start bleeding into each other to lead to this compounded change.
100%. And what I feel the pandemic gave us was instead of work-life balance, it's kind of like a work-life integration. Everybody's working from home now.
Yeah.
You're gonna watch somebody's cat cross across your camera in the middle of a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Someone's doorbell is gonna ring, someone's dog's gonna be barking. None of those things were things we were dealing with pre-pandemic, but now we are. So it's
Yeah.
like obviously those things are gonna start blending and melding together.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to get your thought on, so to that point, when it came to the pandemic and everybody transitioned to working from home, I actually think our generation, I'm a millennial,
Mhm.
so I'll throw you in
Yeah,
there
yeah,
in
yeah,
case
yeah,
you're not.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I think online gaming and
Yes,
online messaging came online when we were
yes,
kids. So
yes,
were you on AIM by any chance?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So for the younger listeners, would you mind sharing a little bit more of what is that?
Um, a AIM or AOL? Sorry, I was
Same thing. Yeah.
okay, same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, to the younger listeners, we didn't have Wi-Fi.
We didn't have text messaging.
Yeah,
Like,
we
think
didn't
of it
have
that.
text
Yeah, and
messaging.
it's like,
Yeah, we
what?
didn't have
What
text
world was
messaging.
that?
We didn't
Yeah,
have Wi-Fi. We
yeah.
had to listen to the Ethernet
CDs. Did you have LimeWire? Please tell me you had LimeWire.
I did.
Oh, there we go. Did you have Napster?
I did have
Oh,
Napster
there you
too.
go. Okay. Yeah.
That way back before
Yeah. Yeah.
people
Yeah. Yeah.
even knew these things. They're
Yeah.
just kids today will just not know what
What
that
is
was.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. What is that?
Yeah.
Um, I actually asked my sister's twins, have I showed them a CD and they were like, what is that? And I was like, this
Yeah.
is how we used to listen to music. And were many other iterations prior to the CD. Okay, so AOL, AIM, whatever, was an online platform where people would just pop into chat rooms,
Yeah.
have conversations, and it was all
Yeah.
via just text. It wasn't like video conversation. It was like I'm typing a whole story to a
Yeah.
human on the other side of
Yeah.
wherever, the country, the globe, the whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but we had to use, again, something young people might not know, landlines in order to
Yeah.
tap in
Yeah.
to the said line to connect
Yeah.
me to the other human on the other side of the globe. Whereas now all you're using is pinging yourself off of towers and text. I think the first text message was sent like in late 80, early 90s or
You
something.
got me there. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
Yeah. So to that point, our generation was the first one to be comfortable communicating virtually or through
Yes,
text. And
yes,
so
yes.
that to me naturally maps on to, okay, working from home or working virtually
Yeah,
maps on
sure,
perfectly.
sure.
So were you a gamer by any chance?
No. My
Okay.
brother is a
Yeah.
gamer. I have a huge slew of cousins. All my male cousins were all gamers. I'll tell you the only game we did have tournaments for, which were Tetris or
Okay.
Mario
There you
Kart.
go. Old school. Yeah.
Yeah, very old school, very.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, Tetris is still a game I play today.
Yeah.
Just
So,
because. Yeah.
yeah. Well, the reason I bring that up is we would talk to each other in gaming. So
Mm-hmm.
we were completely comfortable
Yes.
communicating, through audio while playing the
Yes.
video game. So
Yes.
on
I
the one
watch my
hand,
brother, my
yeah,
nephew, all of them do it. Yeah.
yeah, and there would be there would be some sessions. So I often played first person shooters where
Yeah.
people would just go off on one another. And so yeah,
Really?
well, maybe it's a boy thing where we would
Yeah.
constantly talk trash throughout the entire game.
Okay. Yeah,
And
that's
so
fair.
yeah, yeah. And
That's fair.
so we were comfortable, or my generation, our generation was comfortable communicating online via video games,
Yep.
communicating online via text messaging or instant messaging through AOL. And it's like
Yep.
those map on perfectly onto what eventually Zoom, Teams, Slack,
Yes.
et cetera, would eventually
Yes,
become.
totally. Which frankly, David, what is why it was easier
Yeah, I think
for
so too.
us to go into a virtual world. All of the organizations that were hiring me had a demographic that couldn't quite wrap their minds around.
Yeah,
And there's also a culture component to it too, right? Like Sony PlayStation was a client and they're a Japanese-based company, and that's not how the Japanese work. We don't work from home. We're like in the office, so much so we can convert our seats to a bed and take a nap in the middle of it. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
that was a piece that was really difficult. So to me, it's not just generational demographic, but there's a culture component to it. Well, we had to educate people that your culture has to change a little
yeah,
bit because we're in a situation where no one anticipated.
yeah,
And we all need to adopt how to work from home. But it was
yeah,
easier for people like us,
yeah,
especially, I want to say, especially Americans. We've become, we're just a population that we gave the world Facebook, we gave the
yeah,
world Instagram, we gave the world the ability to commune
yeah,
virtually.
yeah, yeah.
Not many
And
countries do that.
well, I think not only that, but because we live, and so this is a little bit of a tangent. I think because we live in a capitalistic society, we're
Yeah,
always looking for what is the best way to deliver whatever we're trying, and it just happens to
agreed.
be, yeah. And so I think
Yes,
that's why we're more open to experimenting and or embracing alternative approaches to work.
100%. Totally agree. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the biggest changes I see happening in the very recent future, and I'm very curious to get your thoughts on this, is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So I've been going down this dark rabbit hole. I haven't seen anything positive, to be honest. Like I don't see
Really?
the silver lining. I mean, so
Walk me through
yes,
the dark hole. Yeah.
yes and no. So one of the biggest concerns or considerations I have is artificial intelligence. A lot of people make the analogy that it's just like a tool, just like the invention of the internet, the car, the radio, the airplane, et cetera, et cetera. This new thing's going to come to life and people are going to figure out how to do alternative work. My counter to that is we're creating a whole new intelligence, not a
Mhm.
tool. So anything we can do, they can also do
Better.
anything. Not only that, but better. And so for me, one of the biggest changes or concerns that I have is how are we going to function not only as individuals, but as a society when that happens? Because I don't think it's an if, I think it's a when.
When? Yeah. No, no, no.
Yeah,
It's totally a when. Okay. So I have a couple of thoughts.
sure.
I think you and I were at the Latinos for
And
Industrial Organizational Psychology last October.
yep,
And my session was actually artificial intelligence in the world of biopsychology.
tell me more.
And I talked about artificial intelligence being a tool. I literally opened my session like this. Imagine the fashion world without sewing machines. Imagine the industrial revolution without robotic arms to make like to make con not conveyor belts, but assembly lines faster. What happened in the 1980s, what happened when sewing machines came on to the market seamstresses across the world were terrified they were going to lose their jobs. But what that actually ended up doing was created a space for more seamstresses because now we can work faster. Now I can get you a dress in 3 hours instead of 3 days because I'm not doing it by hand. So it created a market for a larger, the market boomed after. The same thing was true with robotic arms on the assembly line, right? I don't know if you, in the 80s, people were picketing robotic arms in Pennsylvania, in Detroit, in all of the places that we were building vehicles. And they were like, these robots are going to take our jobs. But unfortunately, fortunately, what happened is
Yeah.
it didn't take their jobs. It gave them different jobs. They became more educated, quality control, all of the things that were falling by the wayside, right? So I liken artificial intelligence to be the same. Here's where I agree with you. It can be a dark hole. I think it is our responsibility and the responsibility of those providing the technology to create ethical parameters.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they're doing that. That's where I feel like I understand your dark hole. But in the world of IO psychology, we collect so much data on the humans working in our organizations. We collect performance data, we collect turnover data, we collect absenteeism data. What if I used artificial intelligence to distill that information into a report so that I, as the human, could critically think on how to better my talent? That's our job. That's how I would leverage artificial intelligence as an IO practitioner. Is there a dark hole where that intelligence can not only report, but then make recommendations? Sure. I wholly believe that. But can they empathize? We could program them to empathize, but they're only going to empathize based on stories that they've leveraged online. They're not going to they will not have experienced a layoff. They will not have experienced a poor performance review, a PIP. They can't relate in that way. So although I think the dark hole exists and it's the responsibility of those creating it to create parameters, I still think it's more positive than negative.
Yeah. Yeah. So to your point, I think ethics and I think morals are going to be, this is going to sound awkward because it's almost like we're coming full circle. Like, in early Greek and Roman philosophy, that's all they would talk about.
Yeah.
Ethics, morals, how to
Yes.
be a good person. Then we
Yes.
kind of strayed away from that a little bit.
No,
And
no
I,
kidding.
yeah, but well, we
We have.
have.
Yeah, absolutely. We
And
have.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking, okay, we really started focusing on very specialized knowledge, skills, and abilities to do very specific tasks, which eventually
Yes.
come together to form a job, organization, product, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think AI is going to do all of that. And so I
Yeah.
think the fundamental
Okay.
question we're going to have to ask ourselves is anything we can do, we will be able to do it. The
Yeah.
fundamental question is going to shift from can we do it to should we do it?
Yeah.
And I think that is going to be difficult, if not impossible, for AI to replace because it can do everything.
It can.
But should it do it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of my favorite phrases to say all the time is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Here's what I think the fear is. And I think you're the one who introduced me to the podcast, not introduced me to, but like the CEO podcast, like the podcast of a CEO or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
or
Diary
the
of a
diary of a
CEO.
CEO,
Yeah. Yeah.
the podcast that interviews the ex Google executive.
Yeah.
Listened to that whole podcast, thought it was wonderful. And what I'll say is to go back on the tangent of capitalism, that's going to be the problem,
Yeah.
right? Capitalism is going to be what keeps us from designing with ethics and
Yeah.
moral in mind.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, those who are lining their pockets don't care about the ethics.
Yeah.
They just want more money, right?
Yeah.
The Rockefellers in the early, like the early
1900s.
1900s,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, in the early 1900s, abolished the
Yeah.
idea of homeopathic medicine because it wasn't going to make them wealthy enough. And here we are dealing with a country, I could go down the tangent, but here we are dealing with a country that's big pharma focused. That happened
Yeah.
100 years ago, 120
Yeah.
years ago. So, and it was all because of a capitalistic world. I think that's where our biggest issue is. And we Americans live in the dark side of capitalism,
Yeah.
100%.
Agree. If it wasn't for, so if it were purely capitalistic, basic, what's the word that I'm looking for? Efforts, basic initiatives, as an example, the 40-hour work week, Monday
Yeah.
through Friday,
Yeah.
30-minute lunch. Those guarantees would not
Yeah.
exist in a pure in a purely capitalistic society.
Agreed.
So with that, on the one hand, we have make money at all, from my interpretation, make money at all costs,
Yeah.
do whatever it takes to put profits up
Agreed.
versus ethically, should we be doing this? Is this the right path to go? What are our options? And it's like
Exactly.
this is coming really to a head, I think, now, like in real time.
Good. And I
Yeah,
think it should.
yeah,
I think again, I'll go back to the capitalistic society that we built was built to create a booming economic and global powerhouse. We've done that,
yeah,
but we're only 250 years old. We're going through some growing pains, and I think these are the growing pains that we're going through. Immigration's a growing pain we're going through. The capitalistic society is a growing pain we're going through. The power we've given our governmental bodies
yeah,
is a growing pain. I
yeah,
think all of these things we're only 250 years old. When you look at countries as old as England and Germany and we're like, yeah, we're really not that, we don't have our ish together yet. It's going to take some time.
gotcha. So one last point to kind of put a button on this,
Yeah.
or a bow on this, I should say,
Yeah.
is so that's kind of the dark side of AI, is I think it's going to take all of us. We don't know what we're doing. We're running really fast down this path with
Yeah. Yeah.
all gas, no brakes.
Yeah.
And so, okay, that's kind
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
dark side of
Yeah.
AI. On the flip side, one of the bright sides, and I'm hopeful we can take this path, is AI will enable us to live in a post-capitalistic world,
I
meaning
hope so.
everything we could ever want is fractions of a cent because
Hmm.
its energy is abundant, resources are abundant, everything's automated, built on demand, all, using artificial intelligence, robotics,
Yeah.
automation, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm hopeful we can get there,
Yeah.
but I don't know if we'll make it through kind of the dip before we see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm.
What are
When
your
you
thoughts there?
say when you say we won't make it, do you mean our generation may not see it? Or yeah, what do you mean by that?
So I think there's going to be a really dark time. So I
Yeah.
think there's going to be a few companies, probably AI companies, who are going to basically suction up all resources. And they're going to
Okay.
be, a handful of people are going to be ridiculously wealthy.
Yeah. Which is
Then
already
there's
the
going to,
case.
then there's the rest of us.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't think we're going to take that sitting down. I mean,
Mm.
feel free to push back, but I
Agreed.
think so.
No, I
There's
totally agree. I mean, you
growing.
already saw it in Venice, right?
Yeah,
Like you saw the
yep,
pushback in Venice. You see the pushback a little bit in this country, right? Um, I think there's one question I wanted to
yep.
ask. When you say things will be a fraction of a cent because there will be abundance, where will the abundance and energy from whence where the abundance and energy come and how will AI create? Yeah, that's where
Yeah,
because I'm thinking in my brain, I'm like, okay, there are ways to get energy, but how
yeah,
would we harvest? How would we,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So that's where AI is going to work its magic. So once it becomes sentient and once it becomes a super intelligence, it's just going to keep iterating till it is able to extract as many resources without degenerating the world.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's going to
Yeah,
figure it out. We haven't
interesting.
done it yet because we haven't figured it out yet. But if we
Right,
can
right.
harvest, let's say, solar, wind,
Yeah,
ocean, and
yeah,
we may not be doing it in the most optimal way right now,
yeah,
but
that's
AI
fair.
can run these experiments 100
A
times,
lot
a million,
faster,
day after day, minute after minute, second after second.
totally.
And
And
so
they don't get tired. They don't
there
need
you go.
sleep. They don't need food. They don't need,
And they will only focus on this issue.
yes.
And so if we're
Yeah,
able to get there, so
yeah,
the gap that I'm struggling with is there's going to be this divide.
yeah,
I don't know what that's going to lead to, where there's going to be
yeah.
a lot of people who don't have anything, a couple who have everything,
Yep.
and they're going to see each other.
Yes.
If we can make it past that, I think
Yeah.
we're going to live in a society where we can have anything we want. But that's a big if.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that assumes that we don't kill each other in the process.
That's kind of what I was leading towards, is there's going to be
Yeah.
these two
Yeah.
groups and one of them's going to be
So,
upset.
and so here's one thought that I had. typically in war, the one with the numbers wins. That may not have been the case in Game of Thrones, but it is the case nonetheless,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if the numbers are on the side of those without, I think the ability to get there is that, but it might be by taking out those that have, if that makes sense.
It does. There's no right answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know how that's going to play out. I think it's an inevitability that we're going to get to that
Yeah.
point.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
so, I mean, I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah, I don't either. Maybe we should go back and watch some post-apocalyptic movie
Yeah,
that
yeah,
starred Will Smith or something. But
yeah, yeah.
I definitely, I think the rapid change of AI, we might actually see it in our generation. I actually don't think it's that far off. I don't think it's that far
Yeah.
off.
I don't think so either. And I think so. This is something I've been struggling with when it comes to AI, that I know if I'm struggling with it, a lot of people have to be struggling with it too.
Yeah.
Here's my conundrum, if you will. I think it's going to be hard to admit that this tool, this intelligence, this thing is smarter, better, faster
Mm.
at everything than I
Hmm.
am.
Yeah.
That's going to be hard to accept.
Yeah. For humans.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
I think so. I think that's
But
why
do you
there's,
think, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's why people aren't as scared or aren't as reluctant, reserved when it comes to AI, because they still have this internal belief that, oh, it'll never be able to do what I do. It'll never be able to do what a human does. It's not this creative, this empathic, this thoughtful, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, it kind of is.
It is.
Yeah.
So here's my question about
Yep.
that. Do you think the people who will thrive are the ones who recognize that they are better, they are smarter, they are just as, if not more capable? Do you think the ones who recognize that are the ones who will thrive?
Percent. And so one of the things
Yeah,
or
I agree
additional
too.
skills that I think are going to be critical, morals, ethics, I think delegation. I think that's
Yeah,
also going to be a critical skill set that, okay, AI is better at this.
yeah,
Whatever this thing is, let me delegate it to them. And then I'll take that information and then make a decision based off of that.
yeah,
So yes, I think those who are open to it, who are embracing it, and who are figuring out ways to have it supplement what they're trying to do,
yes.
they're going to outpace everyone else.
100%. And that's why I was adamant about bringing AI in the future of IO to the future of our industry, because I actually think we need to be the ones who are adopting it. We have to be. Like, if we don't, then we don't
Yeah,
have moral parameters for, do you know what I mean?
I
I
do.
just, yeah, those were my thoughts.
So I actually ran into this problem a little bit earlier in my career where I was working with a data scientist. And so
Okay.
I'm gonna make the analogy like data scientist is AI. So let me
Yeah.
take a step back.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I was working with an organization providing consulting services, and they were struggling with high turnover. And so the individual who was responsible for managing the HRIS system had his PhD in machine learning. So he was
Okay.
probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
he had access to basically all kinds of people data. And he was trying to find a predictor on what would lead to somebody turning over. And so he threw
Oh,
everything. He threw everything at this
so
model,
cool.
at this form. I thought so too. And then he asked me, what data point do you think is the most predictive on if someone will turn over? So out of all the data we collect on employees, I'm gonna ask you the same question. Out
Yeah.
of all the data we can collect, what would you think would be the most predictive of turnover?
Community. I don't have
Tell me more.
somebody.
Okay.
So I don't have, my best friend just left and I don't have somebody to relate to in the office anymore. I gotta go.
Gotcha. So maybe engagement, embeddedness, that loyalty, trust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like somewhere to feel like home. Like
Yeah.
I am a part of this community. I feel like if that's lost, you're gone.
Gotcha. So he threw that employee engagement survey, which did measure that. He threw in salary. He threw in zip code. That is the one that he found to be the most predictive of somebody turning over.
Which is
Is the zip
zip
code,
code,
the zip code they were using when making an application. So on the face,
proximity to your job.
correct. Yep. Not only that, but
Really?
one particular zip code above all others, even if they were equidistant from the job location. And so on its face,
Really?
yeah, well, for this particular organization, that's what he
Sure.
found. And he
Sure.
was thinking, on its face, he did kind of a dust bowl empiricism, threw everything at the model, see
Yeah.
which. So he was thinking innocent enough, zip code, it's not a problem, right? We'll just be reluctant to hire people from this particular zip code. That didn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
And so I'm
I
like, something
appreciate
about
that.
this sounds fishy. And so I
Okay.
shared this with him. I'm like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but it just doesn't feel right. It
Yeah.
feels almost discriminatory.
It is discriminatory. I was going to
There we
say
go.
it
Yeah. And
is. It is
so
discriminatory.
after looking at the zip code and identifying who lives in that zip code, we did find one protected group predominantly resides in that particular zip code. And so if
Really?
the organization would have gone forward with a data scientist, or in this case, AI approach of we're just
Yes.
going to not consider individuals from this particular zip code, that's discriminatory. And I
100%.
and I think that's where IOs come in, where we can say,
Yes.
okay, here's this data, here's all this analysis, all this fancy work.
Yeah.
This is the output.
Exactly.
Something's a little fishy. And I think that's where we come in,
Exactly.
ethics, morals. And I think we'll be okay in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
our
Because
future
we're the
job
gut
prospects.
check.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You know what I mean? We're the
Yeah.
gut check. We're the law check. We're all of the things, like the question is then, could he have further dove could he have further refined the the formula to identify areas of discrimination? Do you know what I'm trying to say here? Like, okay, you gave us the zip code. Now formula, i.e.
Mm,
AI, I need you to tell me, is there a protected class in this demographic? And if that is, like, do you know what I mean?
yeah,
That's the question of, does that then take our job, right?
yeah. And I think uh, unless someone has our background, they wouldn't know to ask that question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
yeah,
That's very true. But don't you, but what, you're right. And
yeah.
we, yeah, it's
It's
true.
not intuitive. Yeah. Like
It's
he was
not at
thinking,
all.
found the silver bullet, individuals
Yeah.
from the zip code,
Yeah.
problem solved. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Not exactly problem solved. Now we gave you a new problem.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
we may be, when it comes to the work world, the business world, the last line of defense to
Yeah.
make sure AI just doesn't go haywire, start making all these recommendations, these suggestions. And
Hmm.
it's like, wait, is this what we should be doing?
Exactly. But you know what? Then I just realized, if it's a particular protected class in that zip,
Yeah.
my question would then be, how are we as an organization treating this particular protected class in our org, and what is making them leave? I don't know that it's the zip code. I think it might be the way the organization treats them, promotes them, assesses them, all of the things.
Not
That
only
could
that,
have been what led to, you know what I mean? That
it
that's
can.
where I would have taken the data. I would have been like, great, this is awesome data. Now let's
Yeah.
figure out why they're leaving us.
I would even say it's the compounded change, that it's not just the
Oh,
workplace, it's their entire
love
environment
it.
that is, yeah, influencing them that, okay, is my job really worth it? I have all
Yeah.
these other things happening at the same time. So yeah, that's the
I
connection I was trying to
love
make.
love that full circle
Yeah.
moment. Good job.
Yeah. So with that, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Anything you wanted to share?
I feel like what I do want to say to people is, compounded change is real, but there are ways to deal with it. You're not, I hate sounding like a psychologist, but you're not
Yeah.
alone, and you're not the only one dealing with it. We all are. The beauty of our firm is that we figured out how to help people, guide them through that. That's
Gotcha.
what
And
I would
if
say.
yeah, if people wanted to connect with you, where would you recommend they go?
Yeah, you can follow us on Instagram at Your Organizational Psychologist, or you can follow us on LinkedIn at mikhailconsultinggroup.com or whatever. And we also have a website, mikhailconsultinggroup.com.
Awesome. Well, Christina, it was a pleasure again to speak with you, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you. This was awesome. I really appreciate it, David. It was really good.